Good afternoon. Welcome, 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 Mar community and fellow Yazooans. I am broadcasting to both platforms today because this segment and topic is a unique opportunity to merge both platforms together because of the focus of allyship and racism. These two platforms today, it just made sense to broadcast to both because of the topic. Our country is in a moral crisis. If you're not aware of that, you have to have been living on an island with no type of internet connection, no type of connection to news or anything, to not know that this country is in a moral crisis, that a reckoning is happening in this country. And at the center of this reckoning is on the truth. It's simply about the truth of America's brutal, bloody, inhumane history on racism and slavery, massacres, and lynchings. And we're now having a heated debate about how that history should be recorded and even if it should be taught, critical race theory. But hey, we were taught about Darwin's theory of evolution, right? So I don't understand what the problem is about teaching the history of our country and our race relations. And why are we in this heated debate and there's such divisiveness about telling the truth? Okay, we know that after 100 years, Tulsa is just getting recognition about uncovered history of what happened in the Greenwood district. And it took 100 years for that truth to be told. Can you imagine? We all know that there are hundreds of more cases of these type of incidents happening. But if we're going to whitewash history and tell what portions of it we want told, how can we trust the truth? We all know that these incidents happen. And who's to say that it didn't happen in Yazoo City? When we know that there are hundreds of more massacres that's been buried with the dead and whitewashed out of our history, we have congressmen and senators, for the sake of maintaining power, will lie and want to rewrite history. Just think about the insurrection on January 6th. They want to rewrite that. And if we had allowed that to be written the way that they want to write it, our kids today will be learning a lie about that history, about what actually happened. You had people there that were killed that day. You had the insurrectioners saying, go lynch Mike Pence because he wouldn't go along with the lie. So we know that the truth is so important to be told. Our children need to know the truth. In many cases, I think I need to go back and learn our true history about what happened in the history of our own Yazoo City. And that's why it's so important today that I'm so honored today to have on this platform today our guest, David Rae Morris, and his father, who was brave enough to tell the truth. To be able to stand up and tell the truth is an honorable thing today. And especially so for white people, for a white person to do it, when you're speaking it out against the status quo of racism. It takes some courage to do that, and using your voices to spotlight injustices and inequality, which is what our guest and his father, the late writer Willie Morris, have done. And I'm honored to bring to the platform David today to go over a documentary which really was based off of a book his father wrote that caused him to be out of favor with some of the power to be in Yazoo City. So I'm just going to show a little clip of that before we bring David on, just to set it up, just for contextual reasons. I want to show this film, just some clips of it, because many of you all should have already seen. David has allowed us to view the full documentary of his film. So I hope that even if you haven't seen it before this, that you go back, that this will motivate you to want to go back and see it. So I am going to bring this clip in with Willie Morris. Well, first I'm going to set up the first clip about a story that was done on Willie Morris. Okay. got to give you a little backstory about who he is and who he was in his work. So that's what this clip is about. So let's look at that first.
Behind me is the house here in Yazoo City where the writer Willie Morris grew up. The story is his dog Skip is buried in the yard. Getting to know Willie Morris and interviewing him many times over the years has been one of the great treasures of my life. I'm going to share some of those interviews throughout the program. I'm Gene Edwards. Welcome to Writers, Willie Morris. He wrote the biography of a dog, Skip, and a cat, Spit McGee. He wrote 2 lyrical memoirs, one as a young man and the second 25 years later. In all, he wrote 23 books and mentored many, many writers, but perhaps his largest contribution to American letters was as a journalist. Willie was in his 30s when he became editor-in-chief of Harper's, the youngest editor-in-chief in the history of that august magazine. He transformed it from a stodgy periodical to an open forum for the issues of the turbulent 60s. This small-town Mississippian, this man from Yazoo, became known as the person who really was the legend behind the new natural journalism. Willie Morris also became known as one of America's great intellectual forces. It was 1963 when he became associate editor of Harper's, a prestigious but also a kind of a dry literary journal. By 1967, about the time his first autobiography, North Toward Home, captured the nation, Willie became editor-in-chief.
The whole context of the nation was changing so drastically in the 60s, and I had the most profound hunch that the oldest magazine in the country had to reflect what was happening in the largest society. And the only way to do that was to encourage the best writing of the day from the most daring and honest writers.
He lured Arthur Miller and Bill Moyers and David Halberstam and Arthur Schlesinger Jr. And he gave them the time, the freedom to do really fine writing.
I think the writers were starved for a truly national magazine, and for Harper's to return to its sturdy.
And I considered North Toward Home really to be an act of love about a place.
When North Toward Home came out, a lot of people in Yazoo City didn't like it at all.
It was controversial at home because there were some things in it that people took as criticism of themselves or the community or whatever.
I think there are still conflicting feelings in the town and in the state, and indeed in the South, about my work.
Coming in April on MPB.
Today to really just unpack what Mr. Morris said, that there were people in the town that had some adverse opinion about him telling his truth, telling the story of what was going on in our hometown. And I am so happy and I am so grateful that he did tell that truth. Of course, there was some ostracizing of him for telling that truth. But today we know that Willie Morris stood on the right side of history. And it's so important to do that. And this is how my 2 platforms merge for Moms Allyship Against Racism. I have my mark up today because one of the things that we are teaching and working with our moms is to raise children, white children, with love, empathy, and compassion, to treat all people with respect, regardless of their nationalities, race, religion, sexuality, whatever. We're trying to raise children to bring the hate out of their heart. And it's so important as parents that you be that example for your child. And that's why we work with moms. It's called Moms Allyship Against Racism, because we're working with white moms to bridge this divide between us. There's a saying that moms are the hands that rock the cradle that rule nations. If moms can be the hands that rock the cradle that rule nations, then mom have a powerful position, because we have these same hearts. hands that can change the hearts and minds. We are raising these children. Derek Chauvin, the one who had his knee on George Floyd's neck, was somebody's son. Someone raised him. And of course, after seeing his mom, we kind of figure out how he ended up where he is. So it's important that moms have the right mindset and educate themselves so they'll be able to better leave their children a legacy of learning that will change this nation, to make this nation a more loving nation. And I will say that Willie Morris did that for his son, and his son was able to step into the footprints of his father and take from what his father wrote and turn it into a documentary film. So we have this today. This generation now, who might not read the book, can now see the film about the history. And that's why it's so important. And before I bring him on, I also want to recognize another great wise woman who was a mother who said, history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be relived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. And that's why it's so important that we know our history, that we know our truth, as ugly as it is, so we can learn from it and grow from it, and we can reconcile and heal. You cannot reconcile when you want to continue living a lie. So without further ado, I'm so honored to bring to the platform Mr. David Rae Morris. Hi, David. Let me unmute you. I still had you muted.
Now can you hear me? You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. How are you, my brother?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here and to speak to all those Yazooans out there.
Oh, yes, they've been waiting for you. They've been waiting. We're so excited to have you, and thank you for the work that you've done. This is so important now, as I stated earlier, with the times that we're living in, where our history is being whitewashed and not told and buried just to keep a certain power base, a certain agenda in power, white supremacy, and just keep that going. It's people want to just tear down democracy because of where they see that we're heading toward a reckoning. Reconciliations are happening. There's becoming a balance in a sort of way. We're still not there, but a balance is happening when we're out voting now to have the society reflect the lives that we want to live in the world that we want to live in. People have galvanized to say no to the old status quo of 1% being empowered and oppressing 98%. So I just wanted to, say thank you. And I'm just so honored that you're on the platform today. And we want to unpack today, just get to know you, David, and know about your dad through you, and find out more about him. What gave him the courage to do what he did, to speak out? And also, how did that impact him personally? How did that really impact him?
I think ultimately the reason he was able to do what he did was because he left Mississippi. He tells the story that he was going to be satisfied graduating from high school and going off to Ole Miss and marrying his high school sweetheart and getting a job, in journalism or something. And but his father, curiously enough, who was a small town businessman, he worked for the oil company in Yazoo City, and he worked with Sam Olden's father at that little filling station down on Main Street. And at some point, he came to my father and said, my grandfather had taken it upon himself to go out to Texas and check out the University of Texas in Austin. And he came back and he said to my father, you really need to get out of Mississippi. You really need to go They've got a main building there that's 32 stories tall. The budget of the library is probably bigger than the entire state of Mississippi. And
wow.
My father didn't want to do it. He was reluctant, but he screwed up his courage and went. And I think getting out of Mississippi, now it's not to say that Texas is, that much more of a progressive place, but being at the University of Texas, and eventually becoming the editor of the Daily Texan really put him on the map. And he was in conflict with the administration over what he was writing in the newspaper. And so I think he gained a lot of perspective being away from Mississippi. And one of the most telling examples of that is a passage in his first book, North Toward Home, where he describes coming home in 1955. This was after the Brown decision, and the Citizens Council were forming, and there was a petition, and all this is in my film. There was the leaders of the NAACP had circulated a petition demanding the integration of the schools, and 53 Black residents signed it. And the white community came together and blacklisted all of them. And people had to leave town, people lost their jobs. And my father wrote about going to this meeting in the auditorium, I think at one of the elementary schools. I don't think it was at the high school. And it was just chilling, the effect it had on him. And he wrote something like, he couldn't believe that, he'd been gone for 3 years, and his state of mind had changed so much to understand what was wrong with this.
Wow.
So I think getting out of Mississippi really was the key for him to be able to eventually go on and do what he did.
Did he ever say he hesitated to write that? Did he realize the backlash he might get from writing what he wrote?
I never heard him say anything that he regretted anything. And then, of course, he went off to New York and became the editor of Harper's, and that was a tremendous platform for him to be on. And he was able to direct all these great writers to write, and of course, the late 60s was a very turbulent time. There was the civil rights movement, there was the Vietnam War, there was the anti-war movement. There was so much turmoil going on. I mean, it's interesting to compare the turmoil going on now with the turmoil going on then. But in many ways, in the late 60s, it was far more tumultuous. And then in 1970, as finally the schools were integrated, he came back and he wrote his second book, Yazoo, Integration in a Deep Southern Town. And it was an optimistic book. He was optimistic. Right. He thought that, I often compare the two of us. He, left Mississippi for 30 years and came back and looked at the changes and was satisfied, and felt he was optimistic. And I moved to Mississippi in 1983, and I looked at what had happened and how much farther there was to go. And so there was a difference of opinion between the two of us as to where Mississippi was.
Wow. And David, you visited Yazoo City with him, right?
Many times.
You would come and visit with him.
Many times. Of course, my grandmother lived until she died in 1977. So I came any number of times. That's a picture that was taken in 1967 when my father came for National Library Month and spoke to both the student bodies at Yazoo City High School and Indy Taylor. And that picture was taken outside of Indy Taylor.
Yeah, I remember that.
I was 7, so I didn't really understand the significance, but I'll tell this quick story. I believe he spoke to the Yazoo City High School first, and my grandmother tried to bribe me to sit in the audience with her. But, there was one of the, cute student leaders who I wanted to sit next to on the stage. So I sat up there, and a day or two later, he went to speak to Indy Taylor, and I was sort of on my own. And I remember I have this very vivid memory of wandering around behind the curtain of the auditorium, and at some point leaning around and looking out and just seeing this sea of black faces, and I didn't get it.
Wow.
I was like, what? And part of it was because I was in school in New York City, and I had white friends, and I had black friends, and I had Asian friends, and I had Hispanic friends. So it didn't make any sense to me. And I'm not trying to, I was better than anything. I was just saying, at 7 years old, I recognized that something very peculiar was going on with this situation.
Wow, David. I mean, I'm just getting what you're saying, because you're saying that this was in 1967. 1967. I would have been like 7 years old, 6. So we were around the same age. Mm-hmm. So that means the schools weren't even integrated.
Mm-hmm. They had just, well, actually, they hadn't even started freedom of choice.
Oh my God.
Freedom of choice didn't start until, I believe, the fall of 1967. And, that some of the highlights of that were that my father's second wife, Joanne Pritchard, and Harriet DeSalle came over to Indy Taylor and taught an honors class. And that was the beginning of the integration. Mm-hmm. But it was also, the freedom of choice, of course, was a rule that was a program where, you could go to any school you wanted to. Mm-hmm. So naturally, I believe about 15 African-American students came over to Yazoo City High School, including Mike Espy.
Right.
He didn't come in, I think, until 1968 or 69, because he came over after St. Francis closed. Mm-hmm. But obviously no white kids went over to Indy Taylor.
Right. Of course.
So it was, but Joanne and Harriet were sort of the sole, white teachers who went over to start teaching at Indy Taylor.
Wow. So he was, wow, I'm just flabbergasted, because it just dawned on me that he actually went and spoke to a predominantly black school, that he cared enough to do that.
An all black school.
Wow, I did not know that. And and I think about all the history that I am still not aware of. We are still uncovering the history of things that happen in Yazoo City, and your film really helped me with that, with uncovering a lot of facts that I just did not know, David. I if you had not done this film, I would have just moved through my life not knowing even though I know integration happened, I was there when it happened, but I was too young, of course, to understand the historical and racial implications of what was going on around me.
Right.
Well,
and of course, I learned a lot when I was working on this. I mean, it was 10 years ago this month that I started doing my interviews. And, I only imagine what it would be like if I tried to do it today. I think it would be much, much different. But one of the reasons the main reason I wanted to do it was because of the comments that Governor Haley Barbour made in December of 2010 in the Weekly Standard, when he said the reason that integration was successful in Yazoo City was that the Citizen Council had kept out the Klan. I don't know if you remember that.
Wow, no, I didn't.
And we all assumed that he was going to be a candidate for the presidency in 2012. And, those comments, he got a lot of heat for those comments. And I thought, well, my father is from Yazoo City, just like Governor Barbour, and he even wrote a book about the integration of the schools. So maybe it's time for me to go back and look at it again. And I thought initially that I would do a photographic project, a still photographic project. And I thought I'm gonna have to move to Yazoo City for a couple of months and live amongst the people and do some oral history and take a lot of photographs. And then Haley surprised all of us by saying he wasn't going to run. And that pretty much threw cold water on my photographic project. You know, I was thinking, I got to get to Yazoo City and start working, because as soon as he declares that he's a candidate, the media is going to descend upon Yazoo City. And so I've got to be in position. I got to be ahead of the curve. And that just, nobody's going to care about a photographic project. And in the same sentence, I said to myself, but, you know, it'd make a really good film.
Right.
And I'd always wanted to do documentary film. And I knew a lot of documentary filmmakers. So I started reaching out to them. And the one person who responded the most was a woman at Mississippi Public Broadcasting named Edie Green, who had done a piece on my father that had won a regional Emmy Award. And we went back and forth and back and forth, and I asked her questions and she answered them, and we went back and forth. And then finally she said, well, you know, you can hire a crew out of MPB and we'll do all the work for you.
Wow.
And all you got to do is sit behind the camera and question. So I did, I think it was the 19th and the 20th of July of 2011. We did a day in Jackson where we interviewed William Winter, Mike Espy, and Bill Miner. Of course, Governor Winter and Bill Miner have since passed. And then we went to Yazoo City. Actually, it was the other way around. We went to Yazoo City first, and we interviewed Sam Olden, who's now, bless his heart, 102.
Wow.
And we interviewed Bubba Mott, who's since passed, and we interviewed Ruth Williams, who was from the class of '69. And then the next day we went to Jackson and did Governor Winter and Mike Espy and Bill Miner and Harriet DeSalle. Yeah, so I did 7 interviews in 2 days, and I had all this footage, and I said, now I've got to figure out how to make a film. So I went, Malcolm White, who was at the time the chair of the Arts Commission, introduced me to Chandler Griffin and his wife, Allison Fast, who ran a documentary workshop in Clarksdale called the Barefoot Workshops. Chandler was grew up in Jackson. I think he went to Jackson Prep. And as soon as he graduated in the mid-90s, he just wanted to get out of Mississippi. You know, classic brain. So he went to LA and New York and had a successful career as a filmmaker and a documentarian. And then he decided he wanted to get back to Mississippi. And he came back and he set up this workshop in Clarksdale. And so I went and I took it and I paired up with somebody on Malcolm's staff. And we did a little documentary on Duff Dura, who was the guitarist for a band called The Tangents from out of the Delta. And so that was my first film. And then I sort of understood what I was doing. And I continued to hire a crew from Mississippi Public Broadcasting to interview more people. And then after a while, Edie Green, who had gotten me started, said, well, how would you like to do a piece for MPB on the 50th anniversary of the Meredith crisis? And I said, great. Well, you know, now I can learn by making mistakes on somebody else's dime.
Now, did you know Jerry Mitchell then?
I've known Jerry since before the third Beckwith trial back in the early 90s. And sometimes I would go interview people for the Meredith piece who I knew would be relevant for the Yazoo piece. And I would tell my camera guy, okay, this is for, you know, the Meredith piece. Now change this film speed, change the disc. This is for Yazoo. So like I interviewed Ben Williams, General Ben Williams, who's since passed.
Yeah.
I interviewed Donna Ladd, who was the editor of the Jackson Free Press. I interviewed her for both the Meredith piece and for the Yazoo piece. But then eventually, after the Meredith piece aired, I would go to, and by now I'm starting to get grant money for the Yazoo film. I would go to the director of production at MPB and say, do you like trust me to go out with the camera by myself? I mean, not the $60,000 Sony, but just, like a $5,000 Panasonic. And he did. He would set me up, and I would go out on my own, and I would come to Yazoo City, and I would interview people. And then there was one day in I think the fall of 2012, where I interviewed 6 people in one day by myself.
Wow.
And I did, and 4 of them, 5 of them were in the auditorium, the old elementary school at the Triangle. It was, Wardell Leach, Herman Leach, Aubrey Brent Jr. and Sr., and Gloria Lane Owens.
And Mr. Brent has passed, the younger.
Yes, I do.
This is why your film is so valuable for our community, because you've captured, Waddell Leach was the first Black mayor of Yazoo City. So you've captured so much of so many historical figures in the African American and Yazoo community in general. That we have that. So we're so blessed to have that.
And in the middle of that, doing those 5 interviews, I had to break it all down and go interview Herman Scott, Herbert Scott, over, I can't remember where his office was. And he's subsequently passed too. So, the first person we lost was Chalmers Myers Sr., who died about 8 months after I interviewed him. And since then, I'd have to sit down and watch the film and start counting. I think probably 10 or 12 people that I interviewed for the film have left us. So I knew that I was racing against time to get the old people on tape. And like I said, bless his heart, Sam Olden's still alive at 102.
Wow.
And he was 92 when I interviewed him, and he's as far as I know,
he's sharp as a whip. He was sharp.
Oh, he was very sharp, and I regret that I didn't use as much as I could. And then ultimately, one of the most important interviews was with Governor Barber himself. And I will give him credit. He gave me an hour of his time when he was a sitting governor. I threw him some fastballs, and he hit them. But there were some things that he said that I'm lucky I didn't bite my tongue off from.
I totally agree with you, and I will give him credit too, because I reached out to him for some assistance with bringing some art programs to Yazoo City, and he had his secretary call me back, and I did drop the ball on that, and that was because I got sick and I didn't follow up. But he did respond back right away.
Now I will say that if I were not Willie's son, I'm not sure he would have given me the time of day.
Yes. Probably.
But I very carefully orchestrated a meeting I had several friends at the Neshoba County Fair, and of course you could do a whole program on the Neshoba County Fair. I went to the Neshoba County Fair the day that Haley was speaking. It was just going to be his last speech as governor. And I said to at least 2 friends, okay, when you introduce me, and I'd met him before, I said, when I introduce you, make sure you introduce me as Willie's son, which is something I don't always like.
Why not? You should be honored to be his son.
Well,
that's
I know, but it's a long shadow. It's a long shadow. So he comes into the square, and my friend said, okay, there he is, let's go. And it was he and his wife and 1 highway patrolman. So we walked over, and my friend introduced me. Oh yeah, Governor, Willie. Said, oh, Governor, we met back in 2004 at the Republican convention at that party. He said, oh yeah, I remember that. And we small talked for about 45 seconds. I said, I'm doing a little video piece on Yazoo City. Would you think you'd be willing to sit for an interview? And his exact words were, well, I'd be delighted. And so after that, it was just a question of the logistics of getting him to, when we were going to do it. And it was another 3 months. But again, he gave me an hour of his time as a sitting governor, and I was very grateful for that. And he did say some very good things. It's obvious that, he loves Yazoo City like we do.
We all do, yeah.
Perhaps for different reasons.
Yeah.
But he said some good things, and I was grateful for that.
And the thing is, you used your white privilege. You used your white privilege and your name for the better good, to be an ally.
Yeah. And he said
this community. So that's
he said some pretty boneheaded things at times. But remember, 6 weeks later, he got caught up in Pardongate. when he pardoned all those murderers from Parchman and got everyone pissed off. So, you know, the things that he said to me, you know, were sort of ingrained attitudes. You know,
right.
So there you have it. But he was a very important interview. I don't think that the film would have been has had a greatest depth if we didn't have his perspective. Because, you know, I could bounce everything off it. And one of my favorite scenes is when he's talking about, what is it? He's talking about how, you know, it's the you know, they're good people on both sides.
Yeah.
You know, they're that how, you know, the people who were for segregation, they weren't bad people. And then I cut to Charles Ross, who's the director of African American Studies at the University of Mississippi, and he's just laughing because what I said, Governor Barber said this, and Dr. Ross has this great line. He said, it was better racism. You know, it wasn't as bad as the racism that it could have been.
Right. Yeah, like, let's make America great again. For which year was that for my people? I mean, really,
Exactly.
what century was that? Yeah, it's sad. It really is, because some of these people think the South is going to rise again and cotton will be king and the plantations will just come out of the ground again. And I just don't know. And I try to not be divisive about it, you know. But like you said, for the purpose of this film, it was best that you showed his view. We need to see his view, you know.
And listen when we have to listen to it.
Yes.
I mean, and because when we listen, we understand. We understand.
Yeah.
And you know, you talked about Cotton is King. You know, Bill Miner, before he died, he told me about the mural at the back of the old federal courthouse in Jackson, which is where in the courtroom where some of the early Meredith litigation happened in 1962, and it's a mural that takes up the entire back of the courtroom, and it was painted in 1937 by a Russian artist, and it basically portrays, and I can't remember what it's called, but it basically portrays a scene, a Mississippi scene. So you've got the plantation house and the plantation family, and you've got the captains of industry over here, and there's a dog, and in the middle, right in the middle, is an old black man playing the banjo.
Just happy. Wow.
No, the happy people are over picking cotton in the field.
Oh my God.
And then there's the riverboat in the background that's going to take the cotton down to New Orleans. And the original one of the alternate opening credit scene, and this is on the DVD. If anyone gets the DVD, the man who did my music, who sadly has also passed, Spencer Boren. I said, okay, and he was very talented. And you can hear in the soundtrack, the score, he does a lot of riffs on Dixie. And I said, okay, Spencer, play me Dixie on the banjo.
Wow.
And so he played Dixie on the banjo, and the original opening, one of the opening things was, you know, pulling, what happened was they put a curtain up above the mural in the 60s because people complained about it. But I opened the curtain, exposing the old black man playing the banjo, and, you know, different scenes. And I just decided it was too much. It was like hitting you on the head too hard,
right?
Too early. So, but you can see that on the DVD, and you know, that's the great thing about DVD. There's extras,
right?
So there's a lot of extended interviews on the DVD, including some time with Herman Leach, who you know didn't make it into the final cut of the film, which I regret.
Well, maybe you can. Is there any way that you can do some behind the scenes? You know, get those little pieces and put them together just for historical purposes for people to buy them. You know, maybe that.
Well, I mean, like I said, they are on the DVD, not all of them, but you know, I think eventually I'll probably be looking at donating the raw footage to the Department of Archives and History for future
definitely
scholarship. maybe not, in the next few years, but because I interviewed 35 people.
Yeah,
and
because Herman Leach
about
was a
6 or 8
historic.
didn't make it.
He is a historic figure in our community,
Yes.
in Yazoo City in large. He's
Absolutely.
a phenomenal athlete, great dad, educator.
Absolutely. And I'm friends on Facebook with both of his daughters, so they're good people. And and I regret it. He was so classic because he came to the interview wearing dark glasses and a gold lame Obama. It was like Obama, like commander-in-chief shirt, which was just classic. And I hated not putting him in for that reason alone. But when you interview that many people, and you ask them the same questions, if I ask the same question to 10 people, I can't use all 10 answers.
I understand. As an actress,
and I end up using the 2 or 3 most effective answers. And so, he didn't say anything that other people hadn't said a little better. But I do regret it. But that's one reason I put his little footage in the extras, so that people could at least see that. And so anyway, there you have it.
I wanted to ask you about during the filming. Did you get any type of pushback from anyone that didn't want to talk about that era, that basically wanted you to leave that topic alone, or why are you digging this up? What did you feel any like that?
The only person who refused to be interviewed was Jeppy Barber, who was Haley's brother, who of course was mayor of Yazoo City in 1968 in the sort of the height of the push for integration. And he was gracious. We talked on the phone. He was very gracious. He said something like, Willie and I didn't see eye to eye. And that was fine. And I told him that I would probably call him back and try to convince him later. And I never did, because I after another year, I figured I don't need him. The only question I would have asked him, because he was 28 when he was elected mayor, and I wanted to ask him if he somehow felt caught between 2 generations, between the old line generation that wanted to preserve segregation and the Southern way of life, and the younger generation who perhaps were ready for some change.
Exactly.
But that was besides that. He was fine. It was an effort to get Coach out. Coach Kelly, Harold Kelly, of course, was the superintendent of schools, oversaw the integration of the schools, was my father's high school basketball coach. And it took me about 8 months to convince him to come sit. And again, he was very eloquent too. And, there's some people who really credit him for getting done what got done on one level. He was very eloquent, and he didn't want to take any credit for it. He said, I remember him saying, I just wanted to have school, and I wanted kids to be in the classroom, and anything that interfered with it was against it.
Right. And you just hit on something that was very that's wise, a wise observation in showing grace to the mayor Barber as being a young man, because I've had to revisit some thoughts I had about white people around my age that attended Manchester. I automatically assumed they didn't choose to come to Yazoo High School because they were racist. If you went to Manchester, in my view, from where I was sitting, you were over there because you were racist. And if I saw a white student from Manchester, I would totally not engage them or have a different type of vibe about them, because I assumed they were racist. I didn't find out until last year, after doing this platform, where I've had 2 white girls, one did go to Manchester, who brought it to my attention. I didn't want to go to that school. My parents made me go, and I realized that she's probably right. He's 14, 13. You're going to go where your parents send you, whether you like it or not. You're not in control, but that don't necessarily mean you take on your parents' views. You were a child. So that's how we have to look at this moving forward with the people in our generation who are adults now that have the ability now to mend this divisiveness within the Yazoo community, because we no longer prescribe to that. What can we do to come to the table together for the betterment of a city that we love, in unifying a city that we love? Bring resources, whether you live in Yazoo City or not, or you move down in, what can you do to come in this community and bring resources or help bring resources to help build her back up? You know, that's where we have the history of what you and your dad did as the foundation to look at this and study the dynamics that was happening at that time. You know, and just think if you didn't do this, David, and I didn't have a chance to see what that white person was thinking or what they were experiencing and going through. Wouldn't have led me to talk to this person who told me why she went to Manchester.
Yeah. And of course, I don't know if you knew KK Hill, who used to direct The Triangle. KK went to Manchester, and he was about the sweetest person in the world, and actually had a tremendous effect. And of course, he's passed too. He had a tremendous effect on this film. He basically let me use The Triangle to do filming for like 3 days.
Wow.
And then finally he sat for an interview. And I didn't transcribe it for like a year because I didn't think he said anything important. And then when I finally did, I was just blown away.
Wow.
Because he talked about, you know, having to go to Manchester and how, you know, every you know, anyone who had ever been taught anything was called in to teach at Manchester.
Right,
and
I saw
that. You know, KK was about the sweetest, most loving person I ever knew in Yazoo City. But he did like to talk, and I had to develop the, you know, you'd go into his office and if you weren't careful, if you sat down, you were there for 2 hours. You know, because he could just talk and talk and talk and talk, and just when you thought he was segueing and you could start standing up, he would segue into something else, and you were stuck for another 30 minutes. But I loved him to death, and he made a great contribution to the film. So keep talking. I gotta get the plug for the computer, so keep talking. I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, this is a wonderful conversation we're having. I hope that you guys are getting something from this. Please drop some comments, any questions for David. I left a link in the comment section, description section of this video. If you want to jump on and join us in a conversation, if you have some questions you want to ask him live, I can accommodate maybe 2 people with maybe 3 minutes each. But please log on, and I will allow you to come on and talk to David live. So please do that.
I'm back.
Okay. But I want to ask you, during your filming of this project, how long did you stay in Yazoo City?
Well, I made multiple trips. I probably came to Yazoo City 6 or 8 times. Actually, the first 2 times I came back when in the spring of 2011, when I was still thinking I was going to do a photographic project. And I went and I met with Sam Olden, and I met with Bubba Mott, and I talked to them about it, and they thought it was a good idea. And, you know, so then I just had to go back. I was living in Ohio at the time, and I had to go back and wait for Haley to announce that he was running for governor. So again, when he announced that he wasn't, and which I think was at the end of April or early May, you know, then I sort of formulated my film idea. And by the summer, again, it was the 3rd week of July of 2011, I did my initial interviews. Then I came back and did another round in October. I did Bob Williamson, who was class of 69 at Yazoo City High School, and Father Malcolm O'Leary, who of course was the Black Catholic priest who had run for alderman and had led portions of the boycott of downtown businesses in 1968 and 1969. He was still active. I think he's retired now, and he's probably in his 90s. But he told some amazing stories too. And he was in Vicksburg, so he was easy to find. And then I came back and I interviewed Governor Barber and Chalmers Myers Jr. and Sr. And then I would just come back and do, try to set up 3 or 4 interviews at a time. And I would come and I would stay in Jackson, and I would stay at my father's widow Joanne's house, and I would make the commute. And then Ruth Williams let me stay in her house, her family house, which was empty, right there on the corner of what is now Mike Espy Boulevard, and I can't remember what the cross street is, but it's catty corner to the old Yazoo City High School building. So I would spend 3 or 4 nights there, and then I was able to go around. That saved me, 80 or 90 miles of driving a day. And then I could get up early in the morning and go do morning shots. And I remember one morning I went to get the students arriving at the high school, and I did some early shots in the cemetery. There was somebody who would put a Confederate flag over the grave of a Confederate soldier, so I was able to get that in the morning light. And so I made multiple trips. But what happened was I thought that I was done in the summer of 2013, and I had several screenings in New Orleans, and I think I had one in Vicksburg too. And a woman came to one of the screenings in New Orleans named Waleva Lindsay, who was from Yazoo City, worked for a time for the mayor, the current mayor. Is the mayor still the same? Is it still?
It's a lady, and it is
Diane.
Diane Delaware is the mayor.
Yeah, so she worked for her for a while, but when she came and she said she was from Yazoo City, and she had actually taken studied the organ under my grandmother. So we had a connection, and I said, well, just be honest and tell me what you think. And she said, you've done a great job to a point, but you need to dig deeper. And so she was living in New Orleans at the time, and she went back to Yazoo City and she poked around, and she sent me a list of like 15 people with their name, their contact information, their phone number, their address, who they were, how they fit into the story. And that's how I got connected with the, Wardell and Herman Leach and Herman Scott. And I was already sort of in touch with Gloria Lane. So that added a whole new dimension to what I had done. I had good stuff in there, but she really, really encouraged me to dig deeper. And, I was blessed to have that because I think it made it a better film. I ended up working on the film for another 1.5 years.
Wow. Seriously.
And that really, I'm sorry?
I said, I seriously, from what I saw, this film could be a movie. Really. It really could. About a writer, a famous writer coming back home, dealing with these issues, write a book, and all hell break loose. And it's amazing. It really is.
So I learned a lot, and I learned a lot in working in those last 1.5 years. And I told you when we were talking the other day, there was only, my understanding is that there was only one yearbook put out by Indy Taylor, and that was in 1969. And I think it was, they did it, the administration let them do it because I think, they wanted to convince everyone that, see,
we can do it.
They can have their yearbook. We don't need to integrate the schools. And I had been searching for the Indy Taylor yearbook, and Chalmers Myers Junior's parents both worked at Indy Taylor, and then at Yazoo City High School, and he didn't have a copy. And finally, Joe Smith connected me to a woman I actually knew before, I had already met before, and she was staying on the Gulf Coast, but he had the key to her house, and he put her on the phone. We went going through, she had stacks of old yearbooks from Yazoo City High School, and she had a copy of the Indy Taylor yearbook. And he put me on the phone with her. I said, listen, will you let me take it home with me? I was staying at Ruth Williams' house. Will you let me take it home with you? I will guard it with my life. I just want to scan it. And I spent half the night. It was about 130 pages. And I had a little flatbed scanner. I scanned it. It took me about 4 hours. But I gave a copy of, I made a PDF of the entire thing, and I gave it to John Elsie when he was working at the library. And of course, he's passed too. But I want people out there to know that there is this PDF of the Indy Taylor yearbook, and you know, it's a great. I don't know what happened to it after he died, whether he put it in a prominent place for people to find. I can always make a new one and distribute it as. But it was a very important yearbook, and it was very important for me to have because a lot of the people I interviewed were in it. It was very historic, and of course Wardell Leach was in it because he was a baseball coach, and Chalmers Meyer Sr. was in it. So it was a very important document. I think it's very important for the community too. And you know, I think the real aha moment I had working on this project was when I was interviewing Wardell Leach, and he talked about how all of the composite class portraits and all of the sports trophies from Indy Taylor, when the two high schools came together, all of those trophies and pictures were put into storage.
That broke my heart. That was the most.
It was such a moment. I said, will you repeat that? I said, tell me that again, because I couldn't believe it. So that sort of really drove home that, you know, on one level, it wasn't true integration, that Indy Taylor was absorbed by Yazoo City High School. Instead of bringing the two buildings together and honoring both of the traditions, you know, it was not, you know, as I say in my narration, the Panthers of Indy Taylor were absorbed by the Indians of Yazoo City High School. And you know, but I suppose we shouldn't be surprised that that's the way it happened, but it's sad. And I was in Yazoo City High School 6 or 7 years ago, and you know, they've got this huge trophy display. And I said to the secretary, "Are any of these trophies from Indy Taylor?" And she said no.
Wow.
And the only reason that they were found was because Coach Washington, who's also passed, was up rummaging around on the third floor of the old high school, and he found them. And so he started calling people. You know, Wardell, you're from the class of '57. You want your class portrait? Joe Smith had two of them. He had 66 and 67. And so that was a great resource for me, because then I could photograph them and find students in them that I need pictures of. But it was tragic in my mind.
It is. And that is something that I know we are going to work on getting together a exhibition to be placed in the Yazoo City Museum with a section dedicated to Indy Taylor High, in the history of Indy Taylor High. So I would plead to those who have some of those relics from that time to get together and organize so we can put these in one location, so our children will be able to come and visit the history, to know that there was once Indy Taylor High, that we had our own Black Panthers in Yazoo City. I remember that growing up. That's totally a part of my childhood memory. I know about the mighty, mighty Panthers, and we are the Panthers. I mean, I grew up hearing that. That's the soundtrack of my childhood. So that's definitely something, Dave, that I think we can collaborate together, Black Yazoo, White Yazoo, and honor that. And that's something we can change. We can rectify that error. So it's not lost. But because of your work and what you did with bringing that story to the forefront, we would have never known that. Never. I never knew what happened to the trophies from Indy Taylor High and the history of that entire high school.
And I didn't either. So it was a real, like I said, it was a real aha moment. And,
wow.
You know, it broke my heart. And, you know, and the other, you know, you ask about tough interviews. The the other interview that I did, it was one of the last interviews I did, was with the chair of the board of Manchester Academy.
Oh, okay.
And what had happened is I'd had a screening in Oxford, and a guy came up to me and said, who was a graduate of Manchester, and said, well, you should really talk to my friend who's the chair of the school board at Manchester. And I, put it on the back burner. And then he emailed me the following spring and said, again, you should. So I sent the guy a nice note and said, so-and-so said I should talk to you, and I'm doing this project, and would you be willing to talk to me, hoping that he would say no, hoping that it would just die. But it's quite to my surprise, I'd be happy to talk to you. And so
wow.
I got to do this. So my friend Chandler, who did the workshops in Clarksdale, he was on his way down from Memphis, and he ran the camera for me. The entire interview lasted 9 minutes. And I came out throwing the fastest fastballs. And again, to his credit, he answered every question. Mm-hmm. The main thing was how, knowing the history, the Manchester Academy was set up, by people who didn't want to go to school with black kids. How do you reconcile that past? And he gave me an answer. He said, well, it's not based on race. It's a college preparatory school. It's a college preparatory school. I mean, it's in the film. His answer is in the film. And but the whole thing lasted 9 minutes. And I tell the story of having the premiere in Yazoo City in the auditorium at the Triangle. Mm-hmm. And I had invited all these people, and I had to invite him. I had to be curious. I had to, right. And he showed up.
Yes,
I'm like,
do.
I'm like, oh, mm-hmm. I'm like, oh no, he's here. And Stuart Rockoff, who's the director of the Mississippi Humanities Council, they gave me a lot of money for this film. I mean, not a lot of money, but I think I got 5 grants from the Mississippi Humanities Council. I mean, most of them were totaling, between $1,500 and $5,000. So it wasn't overall a great deal of money, but it was a very important money because I was able to, and I didn't pay myself. That's the other thing. I worked on this project for 3.5 years, and I didn't pay myself because I thought it was important.
Right. Well, that's why David. That's why they call us starving artists, because we won't. Right. We love what we do. We do it because of passion for the greater good, but we die starved, and then our paintings and work sell for millions once you're dead.
That's right.
But
but he showed up, and I had put together a little donation box. Just because I was still trying to. I still had to pay for some of the rights. If I was going to take it to the next level, to the broadcast level, I had to secure, because the securing the rights, I was really lucky in that when the schools integrated in 1970, there was a CBS camera crew there. And the film opens up with the stand-up of Phil Jones' stand-up in 1970 of the integration of schools. And then they came back on the 20th anniversary of the Brown decision and did a follow-up comparing Yazoo City High School and Canton. And of course, Canton had just completely flipped, but Yazoo City was still, and they interviewed Harriet DeSalle, they interviewed Herbert Scott. So there were people who I had footage of back in the 70s who I had interviewed. So it was a great juxtaposition. So I was passing the box to try to raise additional money to help buy the broadcast rights, because the rights, they're tiers of rights, and I didn't have the broadcast rights yet. And Stuart Rockoff, the director of the Humanities Council, said he saw the gentleman from Manchester put money in the box. So
wow. All right. That might be one of the best things he ever done.
But I never heard any comment from Haley Barbour. I sent him a copy. I handed him a copy directly at the Mississippi Book Festival. Never got any feedback, positive or negative, from Haley. And the film aired on Mississippi Public Broadcasting 6 or 8 times over the period of several years. So I don't know whether Haley liked it or not.
but we like it.
Well,
and we
I still like
appreciate
it.
it. The community appreciate it. And the fact that you have told the true story, both sides, is so critical, especially for times like this, when we are debating critical racial theory. And that is basically whether we're going to tell the truth about history. And I'm so grateful for this documentary about the town that I grew up, that I got none of this history told to me.
And you know, Donna Ladd, who's the editor of the Mississippi Free Press, grew up in Philadelphia, and she tells the story of not knowing about the civil rights murders until she was in junior high school.
Wow.
You know?
That's the danger.
So
that's dangerous.
You know, it's very dangerous. You know, but that's white critical theory, white race critical theory.
Yes.
Know? We're going to teach it our way, and you know, none of this stuff happened. I mean, Tulsa. Look at Tulsa.
I know, David. Look at the insurrection.
Look at the insurrection. They were just tourists. They were tourists.
Yes. And they wanted to write that and put that narrative out there when people lost their lives. The same people that was defending you. One guy is killed. Most of the officers that day are suffering from PTSD. You were running. If you thought they were just tourists, why was your ass running? They have video of you running, hiding. And then you come back out and give the speech. Oh, it wasn't all of that. Oh, it was just to continue to perpetuate a lie. So that is so terrifying to me as an African-American woman and citizen, to see people whitewashing a historical moment right before my eyes and telling me not to believe what I just saw. So I can only imagine the history that I'm reading that I didn't see and wasn't there. That's scary.
My ex stepsister is a state senator in Texas, and you know, they just got called back into special session by the governor, and you know, the Democrats are in the minority, so there are 31 senators and there are 13 Democrats, and you know, I wrote her the other day and I just said, you know, give them hell, do the best you can. That's all you can do.
This is why I'm the truth doesn't have a color. The truth is on your side and will impact you whether you're black, white, red, or polka dot. And I am so grateful to have allies, people who are not African American, people who are white, who use their white privileges, who are just people, who are people of faith, who are people who have a moral conscience, like yourself and Jerry Mitchell, who used his white privilege to go and gather information on cold cases that were closed. And oftentimes people were tried for it and found innocent, walked away when everybody know they killed, like Medgar Evers. But he had the moral consciousness as a God-fearing human being to say, this is not right. And he used the manufactured white privilege that they, you know, worship and gather around, to use that to say, let me see what I can do to get some justice. He faced a murderer. He faced the Klan and got information.
I saw him talk last year, and he sort of compared himself to Opie asking questions. Opie from the Andy Griffin Show. You know, here's Opie coming up to ask these old bigots questions, and you know.
And they answered him. Why
and they answered them?
Why? Because he's white. They answered him. And the fact that he's able to do that 2 and 3 times is still amazing. That people didn't learn to see the trial from what happened to the other guy. You're going to still talk to this. How stupid is that?
But another great one is Curtis Wilkie, who just retired from the University of Mississippi. He was the director of the Oberby Center. He just came out with a book called When Evil Ruled Laurel, about Sam Bowers and the Vermin Damer killing in 1966. And he's going to be here on Tuesday, so I'm looking forward to go and hear him talk.
Oh wow, okay. Well, you got to share with us.
But Jerry, I saw Jerry talk in Washington D.C. last year, and we went out to dinner afterwards, and it turned out to be at the pizza joint where they thought they were having the child cannibal thing going on, where the guy walked in with a gun and started shooting. And I didn't realize that until later. It was just a pizza joint.
Wow.
But no, Jerry's good people. I think we wouldn't have had a third Beckwith trial without Jerry.
Yeah, so it's people like you that give me hope in humanity, where I'm able to look beyond race and say this is an ally, because you have skin in the game. Jerry is risking his life too by doing what he did. And your dad risked his and his reputation in being ostracized. And then you go and follow in his footstep and come out with a reminder, which is so timely for where we're living today. So you guys have actually proven yourselves to be what Dr. King would say, allies in this fight against racism, injustices. This is about the soul of humanity. We're fighting for the soul of humanity here. And
but we couldn't do it without folks like you who are living in the trenches, who are experiencing, the discrimination and the hatred, and we can raise our hands and go, this isn't right, but you are the guys who are really carrying the torch.
But we need you all to stand up with us. We need
each other. We need each other. We got to.
Yes, we do.
Can't have one without the other. But I have a great deal of admiration for you and what you're doing, and Gloria Lane and what she's doing, and all the folks who are trying.
Yeah.
That's all we can do is try.
At the end of the day, we all love Yazoo City. We're not trying to do anything to make anyone feel bad. If you were on the wrong side of history, if your parents were on the wrong side of history, hey, it is what it is. Now, like Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. So now is a chance to reconcile. And what are you doing to improve relationships with Yazoo City, to help foster activities between Black and white children there, or Hispanic kids or Asian kids there? What are you doing to help bring a togetherness, a unity structure in Yazoo City, where the town can flourish, not just one race of people or one ethnicity group, but for the good of all Yazooans? What are you doing? So,
and the one thing that really did stand out when I was making this film, that it was just obvious that everybody, Black and white, Native, transplant, the Teach for America kids who came in, were teaching at the high school. Everybody loves Yazoo City. Everyone loves it. It was just so obvious. And my father loved Yazoo City. And one of the great, he lived in Jackson the last few years of his life, and he liked nothing more than to get in the car on a Saturday afternoon and drive up Highway 49. Wouldn't call anybody, wouldn't tell anyone he was coming. He and Joanne would get in the car and come to Yazoo City and drive around and go to the cemetery, and it was who he was. It was in his blood. It was his home, and it meant a great deal to him. And by default, Yazoo City means a great deal for me. I mean, I got folks buried there, and it's a sweet little town, and I wish it nothing but the best, and I hope that I have made my contribution to, moving along.
Well, you definitely have done that, David. And what is this picture of you and your dad here? What year was that? Tell me about that picture.
That's the interesting story there. That was a very interesting story there, since we're on the topic. That was in May of 1987, and I was actually living in Tennessee at the time, but I had in 1985 and 1986, I had worked at the Vicksburg Evening Post. And one of the stories I worked on, that picture was taken in the Raymond Cemetery. And you can't really see it from in the picture, but between our knees is it's an object. That is the tombstone of my great-great-grandfather, George W. Harper, who was the founder of the Hinds County Gazette. back in about 1986, when I was in Vicksburg, there was, in the old section of the Raymond Cemetery, there was a plot of 150 unidentified Confederate soldiers.
Wow.
And a Civil War buff, a reenactor, one of those just guys who's just obsessed with history, went back and went through the company records and identified the soldiers who were likely buried there. And there was a law at the time, and maybe still in the books, that if you could identify the remains of a soldier, a U.S. soldier, the government would pay for their tombstone. So the government, for better or worse, they did new tombstones in that plot and put down with the names of the people who died in the Battle of Raymond. Well, my great great uncle or great great grandfather, George W. Harper, had been a major in the Confederacy, and he didn't have a tombstone. And the reason my father's great aunts had always said that they didn't have any money. He didn't die until, I think, 1895. So the government paid for George W. Harper's tombstone.
Wow.
And, and I remember that day well, because we had a little ceremony downtown, and we were all going to then march to the cemetery for the rededication of the plot. And I was with Jim Dees, who was the MC of the Thacker Mountain Radio Hour, and we realized that there was a delegation of Confederate reenactors leading the procession, and they were carrying a Confederate flag. And he and I looked at each other and said, I don't know if I can do this. So I think we fell back. I think we fell back to the back of the parade, because we didn't want to march behind the Confederate flag.
Wow.
But that's what that picture is. Me, my father, and George.
Wow. Well, one of my favorite books, which I love, is My Dog Skip. And of course, they turned that into a movie. What did you think about the casting of that movie, or the telling of the story of your dad's life? How accurate was that movie? And also, was that movie in Yazoo City?
That was actually, it was filmed in Canton. I think there might have been a scene or two filmed in Yazoo City, but it was basically the main scenes were filmed in Canton. And of course, Canton has a very large film community. They have a film board, and they're very actively recruiting films to be done. I think A Time to Kill was filmed partially in Canton also. The film took liberties. My grandfather was not a veteran of the Spanish Civil War. He was not in the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. He actually was. He was set. He was born in 1899. He was set to go to France when they declared the armistice in 1918. So, by a stroke of luck, he didn't go, and the lineage continued. Otherwise, who knows if we'd be having this conversation. But I mean, My Dog Skip is, I mean, there are passages in North Toward Home that tell some of the similar stories. So I grew up knowing about Skip and hearing Skip stories, and I've actually found some pictures of Skip in my father's archive.
Wow.
And some of them, I think some of the stuff he might have embellished a little bit, but that's, my father always liked to quote Mark Twain, who would say, never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Now, was he alive to see this film?
What? Oh, yes,
he did. Was your dad alive? He did?
They had a sneak premiere in Los Angeles in the summer of, right like 10 days before he died. So he did get to see, I don't know if it was the final version, but he did get to see it. And of course, he had recorded the narration with his own voice, but they ended up going with Harry Connick Jr.'s voice.
Oh.
And I at one point I had the opportunity to meet Harry Connick, and I told him that I was, my father had written My Dog Skip, and that he had done a great job as the narrator.
Okay. Well, I have a few questions here. Someone said, I never knew about Sam Olden's father and your grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
So they never knew.
Yeah, like I said, they ran that little filling station. I think it's just abandoned now, right sort of catty corner from the library on Main as you're going down Main Street toward downtown. Before you get to Broadway.
Okay, and then someone wrote, I can't join right now, but would love to hear David's thoughts about how Yazoo is doing today and what we in the diaspora can do to help.
Okay. I haven't been to Yazoo City in about a year. I try to go as often as I can, if for no other reason, to put fresh Mardi Gras beads on my father's grave. For a long time, the Pritchard family would have Thanksgiving at the Gray Center in Canton. And Friday we would all go over, some or all of us would go over to Yazoo City, because of course Joji Pritchard worked at Mississippi Chemical for a long time, and Joanne taught in the schools. And so there was a strong Yazoo connection. So we would go over and we would go to the cemetery. And then I think 2 years ago, before all this foolishness started, my daughter and my partner went and greeted, and Gloria Lane sort of gave a little, we met in the cemetery. It was very sweet. And she gave a little heads up about what was going on in Yazoo City. But I don't get there enough, so I can't, there we are. I don't get there enough to be able to say what's going on. I am in touch occasionally with Jason Patterson, who's the editor of the Yazoo Herald, who was also a great resource. I'll segue into this one story. There was this, he basically gave me free reign of the archive, including all the old
white privilege again, white privilege.
Yeah. He gave me free reign and all the bound editions. So I was able to find, for instance, all the coverage of the petition from 1955. But the photographic archive was not particularly well organized. And I was afraid to dive into it. And finally one day I just picked a box and I pulled it out and I found an envelope. Well, I found a bunch of negatives of like the library club, the integrated library club from like 1971.
Wow.
But I found an envelope that just said, I think it either said October 1966 or Hattiesburg 1966 or KKK 1966.
Oh my God.
And it was 2 strips of negative. The Klan.
Oh my gosh.
In full regalia, and 2 guys in suits. And I scanned them and I brought them to Jason and I said, "Do you know who these guys are?" And we sort of joked that they must be from corporate.
Oh my God.
And the one guy had a button that said "never." And fast forward 10 months, and the Jackson Free Press did a story on the Klan presence in Macomb in Freedom Summer in 1964. And lo and behold, there was a picture of the dude that was in the picture that I had.
Wow.
And he turned out to be, like some grand wizard from Alabama.
Wow.
But I used those pictures in the film too.
Oh my gosh. Well, someone just commented that there apparently was a massacre in Yazoo City in 1907. That they just learned that.
I'm not familiar with that. I am familiar. There was, and I was just contacted by a journalist at the University of Maryland. I did my master's thesis on Jane Ellen McAllister from Vicksburg. Dr. Jane Ellen McAllister was the first Black woman to get a PhD at Columbia Teachers College in 1929. Her first cousin, Janie Gardner, was kin to the Foots in Yazoo County, and her daughter Betty Gardner, who I talked to yesterday, was largely responsible for getting her great uncle Lee Anderson Foote was a federal marshal who was in 1874, And she was largely responsible for getting him officially recognized as being the first African-American, I believe the first African-American federal law official to die in the line of duty.
Right. I think they
And
killed him, right?
I don't know if there's, I'm sorry?
He was murdered in jail, right? Didn't they arrest him? And he was
They did arrest, I don't know all the details.
Mhm.
I think he died fighting. As I remember the story, but I may be wrong. But Betty, and there may or may not be a plaque in Yazoo City, but it is. I did do a quick search, and it is on like several official law enforcement agency websites. His story. So I am familiar with the the violence in 1874. Of course, there was violence all over the country in 1874. In New Orleans, we had the battle for the Liberty Monument. Which thank God was just taken down 3 years ago when they took down our other monuments.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a lot, and of course, 1874 was the that was nearing the end of Reconstruction, so things were getting bad.
Right. Well, David, you are amazing. I want to just go over a little bit about your photojournalism. Just to share that, I know it's not really Yazoo City stuff, but I was amazed to see your work. I want people to see another side of the work that you've done. So I'm just going to show a little bit of this clip, if you don't mind, if you have like 5 or 10 more minutes.
Please do.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Let me mute you and mute myself.
My name is David Rae Morris. I came back first to the Mississippi Gulf Coast on Friday, September the 2nd, on assignment for the New York Times. I have friends in Bay St. Louis who I went to visit often, and we would go to the beach and swim, and there were these grand mansions on the boulevard, on Beach Boulevard, and everything was gone. So it was very difficult for me to find any kind of reference point to know where I was, because everything was gone and all there was piles of debris. The only way I knew how to make any sense out of what was going on was to work, and that meant getting out amongst, in the middle of the debris and just shooting. And in a sense, it was like shooting fish in a barrel, because everywhere you turned, there was a picture, or there were several pictures, or there was a whole story, and it never let up. I didn't make it into New Orleans until September the 8th, which was a Thursday, and the first day I was in town, I shot 750 frames. The second day, I think I shot 600. The third day, I think I only shot 450. But I shot 2,000 frames the first 3 days I was in New Orleans, because there was so much going on, and so much to shoot, and so much to absorb. And, on that level, the camera also serves as a sort of a buffer. It protects you from the emotion. But at the same time, since I was not on assignment those first 3 days I was in New Orleans, I didn't have to worry about pleasing an editor in New York or Washington. I didn't have to worry about making a deadline. So I was free to absorb the emotion of it. So it sort of worked both ways. I was allowed to feel, and I was allowed to work. I lived for 2 weeks in Algiers in the middle of September when I was shooting. I had a 2-week assignment, so I had regular work, but Algiers was like nothing had happened. They had power and water and satellite TV, and so it was very much the 20th century, and I would drive back across the bridge into town, and it would be like going back to the 19th century. The first 2 days I was in New Orleans, I came in with friends, and they drove, so none of us were on specific assignment, and none of us were on deadline, so we just wandered around. We knew approximately where the flood line was, so we knew that we had to stay close to the river. So when we came into town, through all the checkpoints, we went down Causeway Boulevard in Metairie to River Road to Magazine, into the French Quarter, into the Bywater. Otherwise, you could get up on the 10 and the 610 in downtown and up in Gentilly. You had to be very careful, though, because people were going the wrong way down the highway. People were going up down ramps and down up ramps. So there were really no, and down one-way streets. There were no traffic laws. So you had to be aware of that. Plus, a lot of the street signs were gone. They'd been blown away. A lot of the directional signs were gone. Some of the best pictures I took on that first day were taken off the ramp of the 610 or off the 10, overlooking the cemeteries or overlooking neighborhoods that were flooded with water. By the time I got into New Orleans on September the 8th, all of the major events that happened immediately following Katrina were over. The Superdome had been evacuated. The convention center had been evacuated. So the story was no longer about evacuation. Now it sort of transitioned into specific search and rescue. And it was not hard at all to find search and rescue patrols. In fact, we drove into Gentilly on 610 and got down on the ramp of Elysian Fields, and there was a staging area of National Guard and I think regular Army working out of boats, doing search and rescue in plain sight. So we didn't even have to get our feet wet, no pun intended. We didn't even have to get in a boat. We could just stand on the ramp, and which had a very nice elevated angle, and shoot them going house to house. One of the first times I went to the lower Ninth Ward, I was driving up Jordan Avenue, and 2 German Shepherds chased my car. And I stopped and turned and took pictures of them, and the lead one sort of stopped and looked at me as sort of askance, and then they both ran away. But there were stray dogs everywhere. I was standing on the corner of Poland and Murray, and I looked down about a block, and it was late afternoon, and there was this dog about a block away on crossing on Lesseps, crossing Murray and Lesseps, and it was slinking. It's the only way to describe it. It was, and I shot 2 or 3 frames, but the one that I got was, you look at the body language of the dog. It was just so beaten down, so devastated. Those first 3 days that I was in town, I made a number of very
That was some amazing work, David.
Well, thank you. I hadn't watched that in a while. So, and then that, of course, was my coverage of Katrina, and that's really the story of, the biggest story of my life.
And it's amazing that story too have some historical racist implications to how that was handled. And I parallel that to the Yazoo City, the story that you're, telling the history of Yazoo City and being an ally there, and now you're being an ally in this, recovering this history that people will have from a non-whitewash perspective, but showing it just as it is. I mean, just down to, like you just showed the photo you took of the dog, and just how you captured that, and symbolically what that meant, through that dog, the spirit that he was like just downtrodden. I like the way that you use symbolic pictures and imagery in telling the story. I think you might have frozen. Let me refresh. Okay, I think that we are Hold on one second. Where did David go? Reload. Let me. Where did David? Okay, you guys. We've been on here. This is a very long interview, so I might have gone over my time. Let me see where David is. Hopefully he can log back on. So bear with us. This is a very long interview and we have a lot to cover. And I knew that I would be running into a time issue. So hopefully David can log back on. But I really hope that you all are getting something out of this. And this is so important. Like I said, with where we are in this nation, with the whitewashing of history and people taking privileges with narratives to tell the historical events through one lens is very dangerous. And it's so important that you have the unadulterated, uncompromised truth, good or bad, whether you agree with what a person is saying or believing is irrelevant. You just want to know the truth of it and not just one side of it. So when David gets back on here, hopefully he will be getting back on here. If there are any other calls, let's look at some comments here. Someone says, hello, very interesting information. I'm glad that you like it. I'm glad that you find it interesting. And I hope that it's interesting enough for you to dig deeper, to find out even more facts that you can come and share with us. So definitely, I'm so happy that you find this interesting. And someone says, what is this? True words. I was in the class of 1970. I remember 1970. Okay. I'm not sure who this is because Facebook is not letting me see names, so I can't call out your name. I literally will have to get back on here in order to do that. So let me find out where David is. So hopefully he'll get back on and we can wrap up. Okay. Let me have him log back on. This is live, so you get to see all the glitches that we have. Let's see what else. What else is another question? Hello, very interesting. Thank you for the interview. Okay, let's see what this person said. Thank you for the interview. It was compelling. It was a compelling review of history, and it took much research to produce it. Yeah, David did do a lot of research. I wonder what a similar project would look like from the lens of an African American. That would be interesting. So we do have African American filmmakers out there. So I would say Maximus Wright, you're in Yazoo City, you do film. Hey, go ahead and do that. Get those lenses and go around Yazoo City. This is a great project. So it would be good to get another perspective. But this was David's perspective, his dad's truth that we're talking about. And one thing about it is truth is definitive. We're talking about definitive truth. People are into this type of truth like, well, that's not my truth. I don't believe that. That's not my truth. Well, I operate in definitive truth. And it doesn't have a color or, if you go outside in the rain without an umbrella, you will get wet. Definitive truth. So, but perspectives can sometimes be like that as well, but definitely to look at it through the lens of an African-American person, I don't think that they would have, an African-American person would have been able to have access that David was given to sit down and talk to Haley Barber or any other maybe white person who wasn't on Willie Morris's side would not speak to an African-American person. So we probably wouldn't be getting as much of the truth, excuse me, as David was able to gather by using his dad's legacy and his white privilege. So, I don't believe that would have happened. So, yeah, it would be a different perspective, but he wouldn't have the same access to get probably to the truths that David was able to bring the raw, naked, ugly truth, which is also what Jerry Mitchell was able to do because he is a white man in the South. You had Beckwith, who's the murderer, was willing to talk to him. He wouldn't have talked to a black reporter coming there. So that is just the truth of it. Let's see what else. Who is this? I work as what is this? I worked as an assistant to Dr. Jane Allen McAllister of Vicksburg when I attended Jackson State in 1958 and 62. David says he wrote his master's thesis about McAllister as the first Black woman to get a PhD from Columbia. Oh, okay. That's good information. I didn't know that either. Wow. You never know. So we're finding out a lot of historical facts here. And that's always good to know our history of things that were not included in our history books. So I'm hoping that David is able to jump back on here so we can close out, you guys. I'm not sure what's going on because I definitely want to thank him. He said he lost his feed. We'll try to reconnect. Okay, so we'll just chat a little bit longer until he's able to log back on. So hopefully he can get back on and we can close out. This might be a two-part tape because I've totally run over 2 hours on this. And this is such a great topic. So you might have to see this segment in 2 parts. But let's go over some of Willie Morris's books. The Good Old Boy, which was one of my favorite too, and The Witch of Yazoo City. These are really good. Oh, David is back on. Let's get him in. Let's see. Let's reload. Hopefully he can get back on. Where did he go? There he is. Let's bring David back in. Okay, David.
Can you hear me?
You made it. This is so great. We have so many comments, David.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Good. Yeah, I can hear you fine. Sorry, my computer just got tired and had to restart.
Look, we're having such a great conversation. Oh, wait, let me relog. Let me revamp this. Reload. Okay, David disappeared again. Oh my gosh, where did he go? Okay. Okay, we better wrap this up, David, because I keep losing you.
We'll go as long as we can.
We have a lot of comments. Someone just wrote that she worked as an assistant to Dr. Jane Ellen McAllister of Vicksburg when I was attended Jackson State.
I saw that comment. I'd be interested in talking to her.
Okay. Right. Great.
I just see Facebook user. I don't know who it is.
Yeah, because if they need to click a link to in order to let their identities be seen. So a lot of people didn't do that. But David, I just want to thank you so much. Hopefully this won't be your last time on the platform.
I hope not.
And I want you to say something about your beautiful family here. Willie Morris is you're his only child, right?
I am the only one, and my partner Susanna there on the left is an only child, and our daughter Uma is an only child. And interesting talking about privilege and identity. Uma went to Ursuline Academy here in New Orleans, which is the oldest girls' school in the country, 1727. Was committed from the early on to educate girls of color, so it has a great tradition.
Wow!
But one of the reasons we moved back to New Orleans, sort of out of the cycle, because after Katrina, the whole school system went bonkers, and we decided to put her into Catholic school, And the reason we picked Ursuline is because it obviously made a commitment to diversity and to, reaching out across, community lines, and I would say a third to or so, or Uma's class, I think, was 69, and I would say about a third of the student body was students of color. So it was very exciting to have her in that. But one of the school traditions is every year they have rally, and basically it's where all the classes compete against each other, and each class has a mascot. Well, one of the mascots, one of the classes were the Sioux, as in the Sioux Indians, and we were told that it was okay because the Ursuline girls were honorary members of the Sioux Nation. Well, that turned out not to be true. And the decision, Uma was a Sioux. And so it was determined, the new administration that came in her senior year made the decision that it was time to retire the Sioux. So I thought that was a good thing. We all thought that was a good thing. But the picture of her there was at rally, and you can she's wearing a little feather. She's already taken off her face paint. But it was well, actually in the bottom when she still has it on.
Right.
So it was sort of a bittersweet, and I told her, you should be honored to be in the last class of the Sioux because they're retiring it because it's not a good thing. Yes. And I still remember the first time I walked into the gym when she was an 8th grader and saw the entire, I think it was the senior class at that point, which were Sioux, doing war chants and dressed as Indians. And I thought, I couldn't believe it.
That's not good. That's not good. And I am,
you want to support your children, and I supported her, being a Sioux, but I, in the back of my mind, I'm saying this is not good. And so I was very happy. We were all happy when they decided to retire the Sioux. And but there was blowback on that. There were members, old members of the Sioux classes of Sioux who just thought it was disgraceful that they were eliminating the Sioux. But we're glad they eliminated the Sioux.
Well, I applaud you on picking for your child's education a place that has diversity, that embrace diversity. That is something that we talk to our moms on our platforms who are trying to raise anti-racist children, that you really do afford. First of all, if your children learn from you and how you react to other ethnicities. The second most impactful place your child will learn and develop their behavior is through their peers and their educational environment that you put them in. So I would totally, I work at 2 private schools. I worked at the Archer School for Girls here in LA, which is a very elite private all-girls school. And I worked at another institution that I won't name, but that is so important that your child is in an environment that supports your family's ideology of how they interact with other ethnicities. I have to say that the misappropriation of culture, I worked at this particular school my first year there. They were doing Jamestown. They were doing a reenactment. And I was mortified, as well as the 3 Black parents that was there at the time, only 3 Black parents in the entire school. They had the Black child on an auction platform with another kid with a white hair like George Washington or Ben pointing at him. He would slave on him. Like, this is what would have been happening in James. Even though that would have been happening in Jamestown, we don't want to see that. That is just not right. But they didn't get it.
Or certainly not see it depicted like that.
Yes. So that was like where a lot of people, through ignorance, and they can have a course in racial sensitivities and know the history and know that is just not, yes, it's in the history, but do we need to reenact that? And have the only Black child in the school being a slave? I mean, that's just, so I applaud you for addressing that with your daughter. And as your dad was a role model for you, taking you to an all-black school to witness that, to witness him speaking to an all-black audience in 1967 says a lot about who you are and your commitment, to the struggle that we're in together. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And your dad's legacy is honored in my community, because he was on the right side of history. And you're raising your daughter the same way is so important. So this is an example for my white moms that's on Moms Against Racism, for you to see this type of example in two generations, So I can't wait to see how your daughter, where she's going to go. Is she interested in writing or photography or telling stories?
Yeah, she's interested in art. She's going off to college in Texas next month, and again, she's going to a very diverse Catholic school. And I think she's going to do well. But I'm sort of at the stage I got to let her go. So got to go off, let her go off, become the person she's meant to be.
That's hard. That's a hard.
I've done the best I can. Now it's up to her, and of course my ex stepsister Sarah is there to look after her, and I've got other friends there, so she'll I think she'll do okay. But I've done the best I can, and of course she is aware of her grandfather and Skip, her grand dog, and we try to keep the history alive. And she's been to Yazoo City, and she's been to the Yazoo City Cemetery, and we do the best we can with our kids. It's a day-to-day thing, as you well know.
Yes, it is. I only have one too, and I'm trying to get to the stage where you are, to let them go when you've done all you can for them. You shared the wisdom, the education, and they've got to go out and test and see what you put in them, if it's going to be enough to sustain them. And thank God, I have to say, I can't cry his tears for him. I would if I could, take his pain. I'm raising an African-American boy, and I shared with you my fear about that. And that is one of the reasons Mom Against Racism, after George Floyd, I felt like I couldn't sit on the sidelines. I wasn't around for Emmett Till, and I told you I was traumatized by that growing up. And then Trayvon Martin was on top of Emmett Till, and that just really did something to me with Trayvon Martin. And of course, I got to see George Floyd's murder right before my eyes. It just blew up.
We all did, yeah.
So, I can't be quiet. I can't sit on the sideline and say, wonder what they're going to do. No, what are you going to do? You can do something, And so that's how Moms Against Racism came to be. And I have wonderful allies like yourself and Jerry and so many more that are gracing this platform to help me. And I appreciate that. And you might not see the fruit of what you're doing. And I don't even know if you thought about what you did this film in 2015. Yes,
that's when I was released in January of 2015.
And to think that, 5-6 years later, that this film is still relevant to what we're dealing with.
Even more relevant.
Yeah, even more. Yeah, I was like prophetic almost, that we are able to use this film to even have this discussion about something so current, So I applaud you, Mr. David Rae Morris.
Well, I thank you, and I thank everybody who's tuned in. And I'm going to leave the link that you can screen the film directly open for a few days before I lock it back up. And I am selling copies of the DVD with all the extras off my website right now for half price. So I've already gotten a couple of orders, and I will get them out as soon as I can. And I hope to come back. And Mr. Johnson, who worked for Dr. McAllister, I will be in touch with you. Would love to talk to you, because that's a film another film I want to make that has been interrupted by the pandemic. I want to do a film of my master's thesis, essentially, on a documentary on Jane Ellen McAllister, because is another unsung hero. And, everyone in the Black community I met, they had one teacher in their life who profoundly affected them. And Dr. McAllister was one of those people. And she profoundly affected me. And she was a great spirit, a very determined woman. I didn't meet her till she was 86.
Wow.
But I have a whole photographic archive of her because I followed her around. I did lots of oral history with her. I know her life inside and out. I'm still in touch with her cousin Betty, who I talked to yesterday. We've been trying to arrange. Well, she's going to be in Vicksburg next week, and I'm going to for a couple of months because she still owns the old family house in Vicksburg, and I want to interview her and then branch out and get other people. And I sat down about 5 years ago and wrote a script based on my thesis. So that's a project I'd really like to get off the ground because she was such an important. She's what you call an organic intellectual. She many percent of the people never heard of her, but she taught for 50 years at historically Black colleges.
I can't wait to hear more.
She had an influence on scores and scores of Black teachers coming up in the 30s and 40s and 50s.
Can't wait. That's fascinating.
And the fact that Mr. Johnson chimed in that he worked for her, I think that, 40, 50 years later, that says something that she still has an effect. And she was an amazing human being. And I want to bring her accomplishments to life. So stay tuned.
I can't wait. And let me know if I can help you in any way. I'm an actress. I can do this. So, wow, that's amazing. Well, I look forward to hearing more about that and having you on the platform again. And maybe we can get Mr. Henry Johnson
I think
to come
so.
on and we talk about it. So we'll do that. But we're going to wrap this up and we're going to thank you for coming on. You are a treasure. Your father is a treasure, and I just bless you and wish you continual success in bringing these historical stories and truths to life for us. We need truth tellers, not people who are trying to whitewash history and tell one side of history.
It's all one big pot of gumbo. We gotta, if you don't like okra, it's part of the gumbo.
That's right. We need everybody's story in here to make this.
Somebody said how to reach me. You can reach me through my website, davidraymorris.com. There's a link to send a message to me.
It's in the platform. Yeah, it's on the platform. It's right above every photo of David. If you read in the bottom of it, there's the contact information.
Yeah. Contact me. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Bye. Thank you, David.
Okay. Be safe.